A wealthy man's spouse was cast aside following the birth of twins, one of whom was white and the other black. Years later, her husband was overcome with emotion when he saw the fluorescent lights hummed gently in the delivery room, slicing through the mounting tension like a subtle alert. The hospital buzzed with activity, nurses bustling by, carts creaking along the corridors, and the faint sound of announcements resonating through the PA system. Yet, within, the surroundings were contracting, honing in on Kathleen's strained breaths and Harold's quaking hold on her hand. "Breathe, Kathleen," Harold whispered, his voice trembling slightly. With a gentle motion, he swept the damp strands from her forehead, yet the concern etched on his face revealed the facade of tranquility he tried to maintain. Kathleen flinched, her body tightening as another contraction surged through her. I can't," her voice trembled, overwhelmed by the burden of sorrow and fatigue. "You can," Harold urged in a hushed tone, drawing nearer. "You possess great strength. You're so close." Dr. Taylor, her voice sharp and authoritative, looked up from the foot of the bed. "Kathleen, just one final effort. You can do it." A primal scream tore from Kathleen as her body convulsed with one final push. In that moment, as if time itself had taken a brief respite, the air was suddenly charged with the sharp wail of a newborn. A nurse announced, lifting the wriggling infant into view, "It's a girl." Harold experienced an unexpected wave of relief and joy wash over him as he glimpsed the small, wriggling being. Emotion welled up in his eyes, and he breathed out a soft whisper. "Annie." Yet, the moment slipped away. "Hold on, there's something else," Dr. Taylor interrupted, her attention intensifying. "Kathleen, your work isn't finished just yet." Another surge of contractions enveloped Kathleen, and the atmosphere in the room felt as though it was tightening with heightened fervor. Harold sensed a grip tighten around his hand, the sharpness of her nails pressing into his skin. He hardly paid attention. His attention was fixed on her expression, on her quivering determination. Shortly thereafter, the second child appeared. Her cries harmonized with the first, yet as the nurse raised the second baby into the sterile atmosphere, a sudden gasp echoed throughout the room. Harold's smile wavered. The baby's skin, a rich shade of brown, created a striking difference against her sister's fair complexion. The stillness in the room was overwhelming. "Congratulations," the nurse said with a hint of uncertainty, her eyes darting between Harold and the babies as if searching for confirmation. Harold's heart faltered. A heavy sensation filled his chest as he gazed at the second child. Inquiries flooded the mind, silent yet resounding in their precision. As the door swung open, Beverly entered with a flourish, her heels echoing crisply against the tile floor. Her eyes met the newborn's, and her face momentarily stiffened before contorting into a fierce scowl. "What is this all about?" She spat the words, her tone dark and filled with malice. Harold turned to face her, his voice caught in his throat. Beverly advanced, her finger jabbing toward the infant with darker skin. That child, is not yours," she asserted, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Harold, you can't truly think, Mother," he cut in, his voice tight. "Kindly." Yet Beverly had more to say. Her disdainful eyes flicked toward Kathleen, who rested weary yet unyielding. "You've brought shame upon this family," she exclaimed with disdain. "How could you possibly bring this disgrace upon us?" Kathleen's lips quivered, yet her voice remained unwavering. "This is your granddaughter," she declared, her fatigue momentarily set aside. Beverly let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "My dear granddaughter, do you truly believe I can simply accept this evidence of your treachery? Cease this immediately." Harold's voice trembled as he positioned himself between them, his hands lifted in a desperate attempt to assert control. His head throbbed, the happiness of moments before now a fading echo, overshadowed by a tempest of feelings, confusion, anger, guilt. "Harold," Beverly said, her tone gentler now yet still sharp. "This will have significant implications for our family reputation. Conversations will unfold. They will label us as fools. It is essential that you send her away, both of them. His eyes flicked to Kathleen, her face marked by tears and a deep sense of pain. Additionally, there is another point to consider. Deception. The heaviness of Beverly's words enveloped him, stifling, and for a brief, guilty instant, he longed for an escape. "Harold," Beverly urged, her fingers tightening around his arm. "Do what's best for this family," Kathleen said, her voice shattering the stillness. "Harold, please," he averted his gaze. A wave of anxiety washed over him as he delved into his pocket. The necklace he had meticulously fashioned for her sparkled under the fluorescent glow as he gently placed it in her palm. "Here, take this," he murmured, his voice rough and low. "Kindly. Look after Hallie." Kathleen's tears streamed down her face, yet she held the necklace tightly with quivering hands. She held his gaze for what felt like an eternity, a painful pause, before finally turning away, holding Hallie close to her heart. The door clicked shut behind her, enveloping the space in a silence more profound than any dispute. Harold collapsed into a chair, his head cradled in his hands. The gentle sobs of Annie resonated through the room, a poignant reminder of what lingered and what had slipped away. Beverly stood tall beside him, her expression radiant with victory, while Harold was engulfed by the heavy burden of remorse. The apartment lay in stillness, broken only by the distant murmur of traffic beyond the walls. Kathleen moved with purpose, carefully packing a small suitcase on the weathered kitchen table. Her movements were swift yet intentional, embodying a concentration that arises when there's no opportunity to linger on feelings. Hallie stirred in her bassinet nearby, her delicate cries shattering the heavy silence. Kathleen hesitated, her hand quivering as she gently wrapped a cozy blanket around her daughter. "Is this what you were hoping for, Harold?" Her voice remained calm, yet her words held a subtle charge of blame. Without glancing back, she addressed him, her posture unwavering as she faced away from the man who stood stiffly by the door. "I didn't," Harold began, his voice wavering. He swept his fingers through his hair, his gaze flickering between Kathleen and Beverly, who stood like a specter in the corner of the room. Beverly scoffed, stepping forward with a sharpness that cut through the air, clearly displeased with the outcome. "What you desired holds no significance at this moment, does it? What truly counts is preserving the remnants of this family's dignity." Kathleen's shoulders tensed, yet she continued to pack. A tiny collection of infant garments found its way into the suitcase, accompanied by a worn book she had shared with Hallie during those restless nights. The mundane objects appeared to taunt the remarkable circumstances she found herself thrust into. "Please, Mother," Harold urged, his voice barely above a whisper, filled with desperation. "You've accomplished plenty." "Enough is enough," Beverly snapped, her eyes narrowing. "I'm tidying up after you, Harold. Do you believe the world will remain oblivious? Do you really believe they won't murmur about the Anderson name being tarnished?" Kathleen pivoted, her eyes piercing yet composed. "Do you believe this revolves around your name? Do you really believe that Hallie, my child, is merely a flaw to be eliminated?" Her voice remained steady, yet the words struck with the force of stones. "Label it as you wish, Beverly, shame, betrayal, but the reality is, you've become a resentful soul who has lost sight of what love truly is." Beverly's expression grew steely, but just as she was about to respond, Harold interposed himself between them. His hands lifted in a protective manner, trembling with the strain of the action. "Enough," he said, but his tone lacked the strength of true authority. His gaze locked with Kathleen's, and the burden of his failure pressed down on him like a heavy stone. "Kathleen, could you please clarify what you mean, Harold?" Kathleen's voice trembled, yet she struggled to maintain her composure. "Kindly reflect on the reasons behind your decision to allow her to proceed in this manner. I ask for your forgiveness for not being there for your family." His lips parted, yet silence lingered. He found himself unable to mount a defense, confronted by her undeniable truth, the very truth he had sought to evade since that fateful moment in the hospital when everything he knew had come crashing down. Hallie emitted a gentle cry from her bassinet, shattering the silence. Kathleen glided across the room, her hand gently caressing the infant's cheek as she murmured comforting words. Harold's gaze trailed after her, resting on Hallie, whose deep complexion seemed to echo all his uncertainties, his shortcomings, and his vulnerabilities. "I didn't ask for this," he finally said, his voice echoing emptily. "This was never something I requested." Kathleen adjusted her posture, holding Hallie close to her heart. Her expression became gentler, yet the sorrow lingered in her gaze. "I didn't either, Harold. Yet, here we find ourselves." She strode past him toward the door, a suitcase in her other hand. Harold reacted without thinking, obstructing her way. His breath caught in his throat as he searched through his pocket, retrieving the necklace he had gifted her on their anniversary long ago. The gold chain shimmered softly in the low light as he placed it gently into her hand. "For Hallie," he murmured, his voice almost a whisper. "Thus, she will possess a lasting memory." "We." Kathleen's hand tightened around the necklace, her fingers quivering with emotion. Her silence spoke volumes, the tightness of her lips revealing all that needed to be understood. She would accept it, yet it wouldn't erase the consequences of his actions. Beverly cleared her throat with a decisive sharpness, shattering the stillness of the moment. "Well, if this theatrical display has concluded, enough." Harold's voice snapped through the air, catching him off guard. He glanced at Beverly, his jaw tight with tension. "Depart." Beverly's eyes grew wide, yet she remained silent, moving to the far end of the apartment with a look of contempt. Kathleen cradled Hallie in her arms, casting a final glance at Harold. Her eyes held no anger now, only a profound sadness, a resignation that conveyed more than any words could express. Without uttering another word, she glided past him, the door whispering shut behind her. Harold remained motionless, his hand extended, as if reaching for something that had slipped away. Beverly's sharp heels echoed as she approached, her voice slicing through the silence. This was for the greater good. Yet Harold remained silent. His eyes lingered on the shut door, the sound of Kathleen's footsteps gradually disappearing into the darkness. Within him, the emptiness grew, a void shaped by his failure to grasp the one thing that held the greatest significance. The Anderson mansion stood in silence, its majestic corridors enveloped in a tranquility that Harold had once cherished. At this moment, it felt stifling. The atmosphere was thick, burdened by recollections of decisions he could never reverse, phrases he could never reclaim. The elaborate chandelier suspended over the dining table projected elongated shadows throughout the space, its light dancing gently as the wind outside roared against the panes. Harold positioned himself at the head of the gleaming oak table, a collection of aged documents and time-worn letters laid out in front of him. The aged pages released a subtle, stale scent, their borders tattered from years of abandonment. He leaned in, resting his elbows on the table, massaging his temples in an effort to concentrate. These were cherished family records, genealogical maps carefully preserved by his great-grandfather. They represented his final chance for clarity. Beverly's voice resonated softly from a distant room, cutting and dismissive, as she commanded the house staff with authority. Harold dismissed her, blocking out the harshness that had defined his existence for as long as he could recall. His mother's voice lingered in the air of the house, intertwined with the creaking floorboards and the constant aroma of wood polish, yet tonight he craved quietude. His fingers grazed the edge of a delicate envelope, the worn ink scarcely readable. It was inscribed to my dearest Helena in an elegant, flowing script. A feeling of discomfort and intrigue stirred inside him as he delicately opened the letter, disclosing the words of someone who had long since departed. My beloved Helena, the world may never grasp our bond, yet our love transcends their animosity. They focus solely on what separates us, my light complexion, your deep-toned hands. Yet, we are aware of the reality. Our souls are intertwined by a force far more profound than the limited perspectives of those who look down upon us. I compose this with the hope that our children, and their children, will eventually grasp its meaning. Affection knows no boundaries defined by our appearance, it flourishes in the bravery to unite in the face of adversity. Forever yours, Nathaniel. Harold's breath caught in his throat as the words settled in. The reality crystallized with a jarring precision, a fragment fitting into the larger picture with unsettling lucidity. Helena, his great-grandmother, was of African descent. The lineage that Beverly held in such high regard, the Anderson name that resonated with tales of affluence and prestige, was constructed upon a rich tapestry of diverse ancestry. He reclined in his chair, the letter quivering in his grasp. His mind was a tempest, vivid images of Kathleen and Hallie swirling through his thoughts. Hallie's deep brown skin and the shape of her eyes were not signs of betrayal, they were reflections of a family's history, a legacy hidden beneath layers of denial and prejudice. A subtle creak drew his gaze, and Beverly entered the room, her striking features illuminated by the soft glow. She glanced at the disarray of papers, and a frown creased her lips. "What are you up to?" she insisted, her voice sharp. Harold raised the letter, his tone laden with blame. "Have you heard?" Beverly folded her arms, her chin rising in a bold display of defiance. "Guess what? That Helena, our great-grandmother, was black," Harold exclaimed, his voice quivering with a mix of fury and incredulity. "Have you heard?" Beverly's expression grew stern, yet a glimmer of something danced in her eyes, perhaps fear, or a hint of shame. "It's of no consequence," she retorted. "That happened long ago, it holds no significance now." Harold rose suddenly, the chair grating against the floor. "Irrelevant," he insisted, his voice escalating. "You compelled me to send Kathleen and Hallie away. You led me to think he had ceased," his breath uneven. "You caused me to question my own spouse, my own offspring." Beverly's jaw clenched, yet she stood her ground. Kathleen declared with a chilling detachment that she was never good enough for this family. "That child would have brought our downfall. I took the steps needed to ensure your safety. Will you safeguard me?" Harold's laugh echoed with emptiness, tinged with resentment. "You failed to shield me. You shattered my family. You shattered my very being." He averted his gaze, fingers clutching the table's edge as he struggled to regain his composure. The burden of his remorse bore down more heavily now, stifling him. Every recollection of Kathleen's tear-streaked face, Hallie's sobs as they departed, all of it surged forth with the intensity of a tidal wave. "I have to fix this," he muttered, mostly to himself rather than to Beverly. Beverly's heels echoed against the floor as she approached. "Make it right," she commanded with a cutting tone. "That's absurd. What's been completed is now in the past. The past is irreversible." Harold faced her, his gaze ignited with a passion she hadn't witnessed in ages. "Perhaps I can't reverse it," he stated, his tone quiet yet resolute, "but I can set things straight." Beverly began to speak up, but Harold cut her off before she could finish. He burst out of the room, the letter gripped firmly in his hand. After what seemed like an eternity, his direction finally appeared unclouded. As he climbed the staircase to his study, a sense of resolve took the place of the numbness that had enveloped him since Kathleen's departure. He was uncertain about how he would locate them, or whether they would even allow him back into their lives, but he felt compelled to make the attempt, for Kathleen, for Hallie, for the family he had let down. Harold lingered by the expansive bay window in his study, gazing out at the vast gardens of the Anderson estate. The horizon was brushed with soft shades of orange and gray as the sun dipped low, yet he hardly paid attention. His thoughts wandered, ensnared by the weight of remorse and the subtle spark of optimism that had compelled him to take action. Weeks prior, he had engaged the services of private investigators, individuals who assured him of both confidentiality and outcomes. Their objective was unmistakable. Locate Kathleen and Hallie. They had searched through urban landscapes, pursued murmurs, and chased elusive hints, or so Harold had been informed, yet each account they brought back conveyed the same story. Neither Kathleen nor Hallie can be found, there are no clues to their whereabouts. It feels like they've simply disappeared, sir, one investigator had informed him during their phone conversation that morning. Harold's hold on the receiver had grown firmer at the utterance. There was an air of artificiality in the man's tone, a sense of finality that suggested resignation had set in before the journey had even started. Little did Harold know, Beverly had been diligently toiling away in the shadows. She was meticulous, ensuring everything was tied up neatly. A strategically offered bribe in one instance, a subtle intimidation in another, and the investigators understood the wisdom of not probing too far. For Beverly, this was just another move in safeguarding the family's legacy. A name she would not allow to be sullied. She turned away from a child she could not accept. Harold ended the call, releasing a deep sigh, as the burden of disappointment settled heavily upon him. He glanced back at the window, the setting sun stretching elongated shadows over his features. Somewhere out there, Kathleen and Hallie were crafting a life that no longer included him. The town of Middlebury, Vermont, exuded a quiet charm, much like the hills that embraced it. Its simplicity was endearing, yet it held a harshness in its cold, both in the chill of the air and the demeanor of its people. For Kathleen, it was the sole location within her budget to begin anew. The clapboard house she rented tilted gently to one side, its peeling white paint exposing the wear of time, yet it provided shelter, and more crucially, it served as a refuge. Within the space, a subtle chill lingered, even as spring unfolded outside, yet Kathleen remained largely unaware. Each morning began before the sun peeked over the horizon, wrapping Hallie in layers to fend off the chill, then making their way to the neighborhood diner, where Kathleen served as a waitress. With a practiced smile, Kathleen expertly balanced plates of eggs and steaming coffee pots, skillfully navigating the clatter and chaos of the breakfast rush. The regulars seldom left more than a handful of wrinkled notes, yet she remained unfazed. All funds were directed to Hallie. As her second shift at the grocery store drew to a close, Kathleen felt utterly drained. As she opened the door to their cozy home, the sight of Hallie wobbling on her tiny feet made the discomfort in her back fade away. "Mama!" Hallie squealed, her small hands reaching out for Kathleen to lift her. Her large brown eyes shone brightly, the same eyes that had once caused strangers to stop and murmur. Kathleen lifted her up, disregarding the complaints of her shoulders. "Did you miss me, sweet pea?" she whispered, placing a gentle kiss on Hallie's delicate curls. Hallie nodded, her small hands grasping the chain that hung around Kathleen's neck. The gold necklace, a poignant reminder of Harold, shimmered softly in the subdued light. It was the only remnant Kathleen had of the life she once envisioned would endure endlessly. The evening meal was simple, a pot of beans and rice gently bubbling on the stove while Hallie entertained herself with a worn toy truck. Kathleen rested against the counter, observing her daughter with a blend of pride and weariness. Yet, even in this tranquil town, murmurs lingered in the air. In the grocery store, women in tailored coats shared knowing looks as Hallie chattered in her mother's embrace. The elderly gentleman at the hardware store gazed intently, his eyes fixated on Hallie as if she were a peculiar sight, something that eluded his understanding. Kathleen observed, and while she maintained her composure, there were instances in the stillness of night, when Hallie lay asleep and silence enveloped the world, that Kathleen allowed herself to weep. Not due to any regret about leaving, never that, but because she loathed the thought of Hallie potentially growing up perceiving herself as anything less than complete. One afternoon, as Kathleen gently swayed Hallie in her arms on the porch, the sudden noise of a car backfiring jolted her from her peaceful reverie. Hallie recoiled, her small frame instinctively seeking refuge against Kathleen's embrace. Kathleen embraced her tightly, softly humming a gentle melody until Hallie's breathing became steady. "Why do people give me strange looks, Mama?" Hallie inquired abruptly, her tone filled with a blend of curiosity and uncertainty, reminiscent of a young child. Kathleen stood still. The inquiry cut through her like a chilling breeze. How can you convey the concept of prejudice to someone so pure? She looked down at Hallie's face, brimming with trust and overflowing with questions. Kathleen gently moved Hallie onto her lap, tenderly sweeping a curl away from her forehead. "Darling," she started gently, "there are times when individuals struggle to grasp concepts that are unique. However, do you realize something?" Hallie tilted her head, her deep-set eyes locked onto Kathleen's expression. "Excuse me?" Kathleen beamed, her voice becoming inviting. "Being different doesn't imply negativity. It signifies something unique. We are akin to this dwelling." She motioned toward the weathered porch beneath them. "It might not appear impressive to everyone, but its strength is undeniable. It ensures our protection. And you, my dear Hallie, are the most resilient soul I have ever encountered." Hallie chuckled softly, resting her head against her mother's chest. "I possess a resilience akin to that of a sturdy structure." Kathleen chuckled gently, pulling her daughter closer into her embrace. "Stronger," she murmured, her voice trembling ever so slightly. That evening, as Kathleen gently settled Hallie into her bed, she momentarily placed the necklace into her daughter's small hand. "This is a fragment of your narrative," she murmured softly. "One day, you'll realize the unique significance it brings to your life." Hallie nodded drowsily, the day's burdens gently coaxing her eyelids to close. Kathleen observed her intently, her heart swelling with a blend of affection and unwavering resolve. Their existence was fraught with challenges. It simply wasn't just. As she stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet, unassuming town, Kathleen transformed herself into a soul trader. Commitment. "Unique doesn't equate to flawed," she murmured to the darkness, "and I will ensure she understands that each and every day." The words lingered in the atmosphere, almost sacred. In a distant place, Harold could have been on a quest, yet within this quaint house on the outskirts of Vermont, Kathleen was not in a state of anticipation. She was constructing a future, piece by piece, for the sole focus of her existence now, Hallie. The Anderson mansion radiated opulence, with its marble floors and soaring columns standing as a symbol of affluence and heritage. For Annie, however, it stood as a solitary stronghold. The expansive corridors and meticulously arranged spaces felt uninviting, lacking the warmth she could only faintly recall from the hazy beginnings of her existence. Her recollections of her mother were like whispers, tender hands, a soothing laugh, the lingering aroma of lavender that filled the space. In that moment, her existence was defined by the unyielding regulations and formidable aura of Beverly Anderson. "Maintain good posture, Annie." Beverly's voice cracked through the air like a whip, catching Annie off guard as she leaned over the grand dining table, her fork suspended in midair. The 6-year-old complied immediately, her back straightening as she refined her stance. Beverly scrutinized her closely before nodding, content with her assessment. "An Anderson stands tall and poised." "Indeed, Grandma," Annie whispered, her tone soft yet distinct. She discovered early on that engaging in arguments was futile. Beverly embodied unwavering principles. She made certain that Annie's days brimmed with piano lessons, etiquette classes, and extensive academic study. Errors were addressed with firm guidance, yet never with harshness. Beverly was not unkind, however, her warmth was concealed, tightly bound within her relentless pursuit of perfection. There were brief instances when her expression softened, such as when Annie performed a flawless piece on the piano or recited poetry with passion. In those rare moments, Beverly would gently stroke Annie's head and whisper, "Good girl," and Annie would revel in the soft warmth of her praise. Yet, within the house lingered a shadow that neither discipline nor accomplishment could dispel. It resided in the tired gaze of Harold, who floated through his days like a specter. He showed kindness to Annie, though it was subtle and somewhat removed. He would inquire about her lessons, absorb her tales, and offer a subtle smile when she presented him with a drawing or a flower she had gathered. Yet there was a sadness in his voice that Annie couldn't grasp, a burden he bore that she was too young to articulate. What is making Papa feel so down? One evening, Annie inquired, her petite figure nestled in an armchair while Beverly read next to her. Beverly tensed, yet her gaze remained fixed on the pages of her book. Your father carries many burdens, she remarked tersely. Managing the Anderson estate presents its challenges, Annie sighed. Yet he remains silent about his job, merely gazing out the window. That's enough, Annie, Beverly interrupted, her voice firm and decisive. It's time to complete your piano practice. Annie refrained from asking again, yet the question remained, haunting her thoughts, unresolved. Harold's sorrow, however, permeated their interactions in ways he never intended. As he tucked Annie in for the night, he lingered by her bedside, gently brushing her hair while softly whispering, "Good night, my darling." His voice carried a constant tremor, as though he were seeking forgiveness for an unspoken transgression that Annie could not grasp. During those still moments, Annie frequently sensed the emptiness with the greatest intensity. She remained unaware of the truth. She was unaware of the names Kathleen or Hallie, yet she felt the void of something, or someone, who ought to have been present. It was a deep, unexpressed pain, an elusive fragment she struggled to identify. Beverly broke the quiet with a firm hand, molding Annie into the perfect representation of an Anderson heir. Harold was enveloped in a silent remorse, presenting soft smiles and brief gestures of love that merely suggested the weight of his sorrow, while Annie navigated her upbringing under their influence, attempting to fulfill Beverly's demands while longing for the affection she felt her father was unable to provide. With the passage of time, Annie became adept at maneuvering through the dynamics of the Anderson household. She thrived in her academic pursuits, performed piano with remarkable skill, and embodied the elegance that Beverly expected. In the quiet solitude of her room at night, she found herself lying awake, gazing at the ceiling, her thoughts swirling with unspoken questions. Annie had no way of understanding that her father's sorrow stemmed from the absence of a family she had never known, a mother and sister who existed solely in the shadowy recesses of Harold's memories. Yet, in her naivety, Annie sensed the heaviness of that absence, a silent reality that molded her existence without her grasping its source. The campus of Cornell University buzzed with vitality, students hurrying from one class to another, their discussions intertwining to create a rich tapestry of thoughts and aspirations. Among them, Annie glided effortlessly, her background shining through in her elegant presence and refined way of speaking. The new semester proved to be both demanding and energizing, with the vibrant social justice atmosphere at the university captivating her from the start. In a sun-drenched room of the campus community center, during one of those gatherings, Annie first laid eyes on Hallie. A small gathering of 15 students formed a loose circle, sharing thoughts on an upcoming project aimed at aiding underprivileged youth in the city. Annie had articulated her thoughts on funding strategies with assurance as Hallie walked in, a bit breathless yet beaming with warmth. She expressed her regrets for the delay, her demeanor relaxed and assured. Annie observed the newcomer with a sense of intrigue. Hallie had an undeniable allure, her keen intellect, the confidence in her words, and the subtle power she radiated. Her rich brown skin and flowing natural curls surrounded a face that radiated both beauty and warmth. As the meeting concluded and students started to scatter, Hallie made her way over to Annie. "You made some excellent points," she remarked, her smile growing broader. Annie smiled back. "Thank you. Are you a newcomer to the group?" Hallie gave a slight nod. "Indeed, I just made the transfer this semester. I decided to dive in." She reached out her hand. "My name is Hallie." "Annie," she said, shaking Hallie's hand. Their bond formed in an instant. As they strolled toward the library, their dialogue flowed effortlessly, creating a comfortable cadence between them. Both were deeply committed to community work, and they swiftly uncovered common values in their aspiration to create impactful change. The following day, the lecture hall thrummed with excitement as students entered, bustling to secure their spots. Annie shifted her bag on the desk and surveyed the room, her eyes settling on a girl with dark, coiled hair seated a few rows distant. "She is Hallie, the girl from yesterday." Her lively presence appeared to envelop the surroundings, from her effortless smile to the way she expressively gestured while speaking. As the professor commenced the lecture on systemic inequality in urban housing, Annie caught herself stealing another glance at the girl. Annie felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity about her, yet she couldn't quite identify the reason behind it. Only after the class concluded and the students started to leave did she realize she was walking alongside the unfamiliar figure. "Hey," Annie suggested, her voice inviting yet uncertain. The girl pivoted, her grin expanding. "Hello, Annie." Their names lingered momentarily, and then a shared chuckle escaped them both. "Oh, that's perfectly clear," Hallie remarked with a smile. "Not at all," Annie replied with a chuckle. "Could you spare a moment?" Hallie nodded, expressing her enthusiasm for grabbing coffee and delving deeper into our class discussions. "Absolutely. That was quite a ride, wasn't it? I'm completely on board with sorting it out over some coffee." At the campus cafe, the dialogue unfolded effortlessly. Hallie expressed her enthusiasm for her involvement with a local nonprofit dedicated to affordable housing. Annie was struck by the confidence and depth in her words. Hallie's experiences carried a certain rawness, a viewpoint molded by hardship that Annie, raised in a more sheltered environment, found utterly captivating. "Text, I suppose my mother significantly influences my choices," Hallie remarked, her fingers absent-mindedly toying with a delicate gold necklace that adorned her neck. "She poured every ounce of her effort into ensuring I understood that I was greater than the perceptions others held of me." Annie's eyes were drawn to the necklace, captivated by its understated elegance and the almost sacred quality of Hallie's touch. "That's lovely," she murmured gently. "Does it belong to her?" Hallie gave a slight nod. "She entrusted it to me before she left this world, claiming it was a piece of my narrative." Her voice took on a gentler tone, and for a brief moment, her vibrant spirit seemed to fade. "I don it daily to ensure it stays at the forefront of my mind." Annie instinctively reached across the table, her hand lightly grazing Hallie's. "She sounds incredible," Hallie smiled, the heaviness easing just a bit. "She was, and she always encouraged me to see my uniqueness as a positive attribute." Their dialogue shifted, and before long, Hallie inquired, "What about you? It appears that you have everything in order. What inspired your journey into social justice?" Annie paused, grappling with how to express her thoughts. "My father, I suppose," she remarked at last. "He has consistently embodied a gentle and reserved demeanor. Yet, a certain melancholy lingers within him. A part of me seeks to grasp the reasons behind it, and assisting others seems like a pathway to achieve that understanding." Hallie inclined her head in contemplation. "That's quite substantial. Do you believe he will ever bring it up?" "I'm not sure," Annie confessed, "but I certainly hope so." As the cafe began to clear out and the sun sank lower in the sky, Annie stole a glance at her watch. "You really ought to join me for dinner at my place," she suggested without a second thought. "My father would be thrilled to meet you, and I would be eager to continue this discussion." Hallie appeared taken aback, yet delighted. "Do you really think so?" "I prefer to respect your space." "That's unlikely." "Of course, it's the smallest gesture I can offer after all that you've given." Hallie paused for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "Absolutely, dinner sounds delightful." As they went their separate ways, Annie's thoughts swirled with excitement. She had no way of realizing the profound impact her invitation would ultimately have. Nor could Hallie have anticipated the moment when her narrative and her necklace would intertwine with a history unknown to both. We are eager to find out which child is enjoying this story. Feel free to share this in the comments. Every family tale is truly delightful. Let us proceed. The Anderson mansion had transformed since Beverly's departure 3 years ago. The atmosphere, previously vibrant with her commanding essence, now seemed weighed down by her absence. Harold, liberated from his mother's expectations, drifted through the magnificent halls like a whisper. In the absence of Beverly's unwavering discipline, the house had settled into a disquieting stillness, its magnificence still present, yet it felt like a mere husk burdened by echoes of the past and lingering sorrow. The dinner table, an expansive expanse of gleaming mahogany, was arranged flawlessly for three. Harold positioned himself at the head of the table, his hands neatly folded before him, gazing into the dancing candlelight as though entranced by its mysteries. Annie's bright voice floated in from the foyer as she welcomed her guest, her tone inviting and full of enthusiasm. "Dad, this is Hallie," Annie announced as she stepped inside, guiding a young woman into the room. Harold stood up, wearing a courteous yet unfocused smile. The appearance of Hallie took him by surprise, her name resonating in his mind, her captivating features drawing his gaze, the assured manner in which she moved, and the distinctive necklace that shimmered gently against her chest. His heart pounded heavily in his chest as his eyes remained fixed on the fragile chain. "Hallie, this is my father," Annie announced with a bright smile. "Mr. Anderson, it's a pleasure to meet you," Hallie said, reaching out her hand. Her voice flowed effortlessly, a calm current, yet her expression melted into warmth as Harold's uncertain touch intertwined with hers. "Welcome," he managed, his throat constricting. The trio settled in, and Annie broke the stillness with lively chatter. She discussed their joint classes, the campus project they were collaborating on, and how Hallie's perspective had proven to be essential. Hallie, while initially hesitant, started to reveal more of herself. She reminisced about her early years, her departed mother, and the obstacles they had encountered. Harold absorbed every word, his thoughts swirling with unspoken inquiries that lingered in the silence. "She always told me I was special," Hallie said, her fingers grazing the necklace in a distracted manner. "She mentioned that this necklace held a piece of our narrative, yet she never truly clarified what she intended by that. This is everything I possess of her at this moment." Harold's breath hitched. The pendant. It was clear, the elaborate craftsmanship, the subtle fastening. It was a choice made for Kathleen long ago. He gulped, his fingers gripping the napkin beneath the table with increasing intensity. "That's a stunning work," he remarked, his voice tight with emotion. Hallie looked down at it, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Thank you. It holds a special place in my heart." Harold's eyes darted toward Annie, who was absorbed in the moment. She remained oblivious to the tempest brewing within him, a tumult of understanding colliding with a lifetime of sorrow and remorse. Could this young woman seated opposite him possibly be Hallie? Is that his Hallie? As the evening progressed, Harold's inquiries became increasingly insistent within his thoughts. Every detail Hallie shared, the challenges her mother faced, the way she articulated resilience and love, aligned seamlessly. Yet, he remained silent, a tumult of fear and hope intertwining within him. Once dessert was finished, Annie politely stepped away to fetch a book she was eager to share with Hallie. As soon as she exited the room, the atmosphere thickened. "Hallie," Harold started, his tone measured. "Your mother. She must have been an extraordinary woman." Hallie gazed at him, her demeanor becoming more gentle. "She existed. She nurtured me single-handedly and provided all that she was able to offer. I can't help but long for her presence to witness my journey today." Harold paused, his voice faltering as he struggled to find the right words. Before he could elaborate, Annie reappeared, her vibrant presence dissolving the unease. "Hallie, this book is going to captivate you." Annie expressed her enthusiasm about the influence of housing policies on marginalized communities. Hallie beamed, grasping the book and leafing through its pages with curiosity. Later that evening, after the girls had exchanged their farewells and Hallie departed with assurances of a future visit, Harold withdrew to his study. The house, enveloped in silence once again, felt as though it was closing in around him. He descended to the living room with a hushed demeanor, retrieving the cup that Hallie had sipped from prior to the maid's arrival to tidy up. It stood as the sole fragment of proof, the one element that lightened the weight of his existence. Harold grasped the cup tightly, his thoughts swirling in a frenzy. The likeness, the pendant, the tales Hallie had recounted. It was too significant to be mere chance. His heart raced with anticipation. He extended his hand toward the phone, inputting a number that had long been forgotten. "This is Harold Anderson," he stated, his voice calm yet firm. "I require a DNA test to be conducted." Silently. As the call concluded, Harold reclined in his chair, the gravity of his choice enveloping him. If his instincts were accurate, the girl who occupied the seat at his table this evening was more than merely a visitor. She was his child. The house lay in stillness, interrupted only by the soft ticking of the grandfather clock echoing through the hallway. Harold found himself in solitude within his study, a sealed envelope lying quietly on the desk in front of him. The results of the DNA test had come in that morning, brought by a courier who was quick to leave. For hours, Harold had gazed at the envelope, the possibilities swirling in his mind like a tempest. At last, he ripped it apart, his hands quaking with anticipation. The words leaped from the page. The bond between a parent and child. Almost certain. Harold felt a tightness in his throat. It was indeed true. Hallie was his child. Relief and dread intertwined within him, his mind swiftly drifting to Kathleen. He had let both of them down. A note affixed to the report unveiled his deepest dread. Kathleen had departed from this world 2 years prior. The burden of it all loomed over him, a heavy presence that felt as if it might break him. As the first surge of hopelessness faded, a fresh determination emerged to take its place. He was unable to change what had already happened, yet he could strive to improve what lay ahead. That evening, Harold summoned Annie and Hallie to his home, emphasizing the importance of the matter at hand. The dining room was set, albeit in a more casual manner than what is typically expected. Annie was the first to arrive, her lively conversation brightening the atmosphere as usual, yet Harold's forced smile caught attention. "Hey Dad, how are you doing?" Annie inquired, a crease forming on her forehead. There's a lot swirling in my thoughts," Harold responded, dismissing the inquiry. As Hallie stepped in, the atmosphere thickened with an unmistakable intensity. She welcomed them with open arms, oblivious to the intricate web of emotions surrounding her. The evening commenced with courteous dialogue, with Annie taking the lead as she shared anecdotes from her time on campus. Harold offered his thoughts with restraint, his gaze frequently drifting toward Hallie. At last, unable to hold back any further, Harold placed his fork aside and took a moment to clear his throat. "Hallie," he started, his voice calm yet firm. "I have something important to share with you. Both of you." Annie paused abruptly, her gaze flickering between her father and Hallie. "All right," Hallie replied with a hint of hesitation, her body tensing up. Harold paused, the gravity of his words bearing heavily upon him. "Hallie, that necklace you have on, it looks familiar to me." Hallie blinked, her fingers gently grazing the pendant. "Is that so?" He gave a slight nod. "Many years ago, I entrusted it to your mother." Hallie's expression was clouded with uncertainty. "My mother, but, how is that possible?" Harold inhaled deeply, his voice quivering with emotion. "Hallie, I have a strong feeling that you are my daughter." The phrases lingered, dense and unyielding. Annie inhaled sharply, her hand darting to her mouth as she glanced at Hallie. Hallie stood still, her face reflecting a blend of astonishment and incredulity. "What are you referring to?" Harold's voice trembled as he continued onward. "I was unaware until just now. After your visit for dinner the other night, I decided to run a DNA test. The findings validate it. You are my daughter." With a sudden movement, Hallie's chair screeched across the floor as she rose, her fists tightly balled at her sides. "This has to be some kind of joke," she exclaimed, her voice escalating in pitch. "You can't simply, what? Suddenly declare that I am your daughter." "It's not out of thin air," Harold insisted, his voice tinged with urgency. I committed errors, grave errors. Your mother, Kathleen, she He hesitated, his hands trembling. She was my partner, but I set her free. I released both of you, and the weight of that decision has haunted me daily ever since. Hallie fixed her gaze on him, her eyes aflame with intensity. You let us go, she repeated, her voice laced with fury. Are you really saying that you left us behind? That my mother had to raise me on her own because of you? Hallie, please, Harold implored, his posture shifting as if he were about to step closer to her. I was unsure of how to resolve it. I found myself vulnerable, swayed by the influence of misguided voices. Stop, Hallie interjected, her voice trembling. Excuses are not an option for you. My mother toiled endlessly to provide me with a life, and you were here, in this grand mansion, doing what exactly? Are you experiencing self-pity? Hallie, Annie interjected gently, extending a hand, but Hallie recoiled, her breaths quick and shallow. I can't do this, Hallie said, taking a step back. I cannot remain in this place. Hallie, please, Harold implored, his voice trembling. However, Hallie was already making her way to the door. She hesitated for a moment, her back facing them, before slowly turning her body. She deserved better than you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And then she vanished. The door banged closed, its reverberation resonating throughout the home. Harold slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Across the table, Annie remained still, tears flowing quietly down her face. Father, she uttered at last, her voice quivering. Why was it never shared with me? Harold gazed upward, his eyes swollen and brimming with remorse. He confessed it was due to his fear. And now, it seems I may have lost her for good. The atmosphere grew heavy, enveloping them in a profound stillness as the evening unfolded. In the stillness of the night, the soft echo of Hallie's footsteps gradually disappeared into the darkness. Hallie meandered through the city streets, the crisp night air nipping at her skin. She grasped her necklace firmly, her thoughts swirling with the discoveries of the night. Her mind swirled with a tumult of frustration, uncertainty, and an unacknowledged yearning. The father she had never known had been present all along, residing in a grand mansion while her mother fought to keep them above water. She discovered herself in a park, solitary except for the rare jogger passing by. A gentle light from a street lamp bathed a solitary bench by the lake in a warm embrace. Hallie settled into her seat, the tightness in her shoulders gradually melting into fatigue. The sound of her mother's voice lingered in her thoughts. Always remember, Hallie, your value is determined by you alone. You possess greater strength than you realize. Yet this evening, she felt anything but strong. The campus lay tranquil under the soft glow of the early morning, its typical vibrancy muted as students made their way to libraries and lecture halls. Hallie perched on a bench by the quad, her fingers encircling a cup of coffee that had lost its warmth. Her thoughts swirled with the happenings of the previous night, echoing Harold's words repeatedly. The burden of it all seemed insurmountable. The unexpected discovery of a father she was reluctant to acknowledge, the treachery she found impossible to pardon, and the inquiries she feared to voice. She remained oblivious to Harold's presence until his shadow loomed over her. Hallie glanced up abruptly, her demeanor shifting as she locked eyes with him. What brings you here? She inquired, her voice sharp. Harold paused, his hands buried deep within the confines of his coat pockets. His typically calm exterior had vanished, giving way to an unguarded fragility. He spoke gently, I came to see you. Hallie dismissed the notion with a scoff, pivoting away. Your efforts have been sufficient. I understand, Harold replied, his voice trembling. He approached with cautious uncertainty. However, I require you to listen to my perspective. Kindly. Hallie's shoulders tensed, yet she remained in place. She placed her coffee on the bench next to her and folded her arms. All right. Go ahead and express what you need to express. Then go. Harold settled onto the bench, mindful to maintain a respectful distance between them. He gripped his hands firmly, his knuckles pale with tension. "I'm at a loss for where to start," he confessed, his voice quivering. "This moment has occupied my thoughts for years, yet now that it has arrived," Hallie remained silent, her expression resolute. Harold continued, his gaze directed at the ground, "I wish to share something about your mother. Kathleen was remarkable. She possessed a remarkable strength, a deep compassion, and an exuberance that radiated from her very being. My affection for her transcends any expression I could ever convey." He hesitated, his voice faltering. "Yet, I let her down. I let both of you down." Hallie's jaw clenched, yet she remained silent. "I allowed fear to dictate my actions," Harold confessed, his voice heavy with remorse. "Apprehension regarding my mother's scrutiny, of forfeiting the existence I believed I had to safeguard. In my fragility, I caused pain to those I ought to have shielded above all else." He finally turned his gaze to Hallie, his eyes brimming with tears. "That was uncalled for. Kathleen didn't either. She was worthy of a companion who would support her, not one who allowed her to slip away. You were worthy of a father who stood up for you, not one who cowered behind justifications." Hallie's lips quivered, yet she maintained a steely facade. "Do you really believe that saying this improves the situation? Does it wipe away the years my mother fought to provide me what you were too scared to offer?" "Absolutely not," Harold replied without hesitation, shaking his head firmly. "I understand that it doesn't. I understand that I can never truly compensate for what you have lost. Yet, I stand before you now, Hallie. I'm here because I wish to give it a shot, if you'll allow me." Hallie averted her gaze, her eyes filled with unspoken sorrow. She yearned to despise him, to disregard his words and turn her back. Yet there was something in his voice, a certain fragility, a genuine quality, that caused her to hesitate. "What's the reason for this moment?" she inquired, her tone scarcely rising above a murmur. Harold stated plainly that he could no longer allow fear to dictate his actions. "Because I lost Kathleen, and I can't bear the thought of losing you as well. I am your father, Hallie, and I hope to embrace that role, if you will allow me to." In that instant, Annie emerged, her cheeks rosy from the exertion of her sprint. "Hallie," she said, her voice filled with urgency as her eyes darted between them. "I arrived promptly after Dad informed me he would be here." Hallie rose suddenly, her feelings surging uncontrollably. "Excuse me? Are you here to persuade me as well?" "No," Annie murmured gently, moving in closer. "I'm here out of concern for you, and because I understand the depth of Dad's regrets regarding everything that has happened. He may have his flaws, Hallie, but he's making an effort. Kindly refrain from excluding him." Hallie's defenses faltered, her eyes darting between Harold and Annie. The fury and sense of treachery she experienced lingered, yet underneath lay a deeper emotion. A spark of desire she couldn't dismiss. Harold stood up, his actions deliberate and cautious. "Take your time," he said, his voice heavy with feeling. "I will be patient, no matter how long it requires. Just, I want you to understand the depth of my feelings for you." Hallie gazed at him intently, the barriers she'd constructed around her heart quivering. At last, she faced the bench again, grasping her coffee cup. "I'm not sure I can find it in my heart to forgive you," she murmured softly. Harold nodded, his expression a blend of anguish and optimism. "I comprehend." As he and Annie walked away, Hallie stayed on the bench, her coffee growing cold in her hands. She chose not to return their call, yet remained in place. After years of uncertainty, she finally permitted herself to contemplate the significance of having a father. As Hallie entered the Anderson mansion, her suitcase following closely, a distinct atmosphere enveloped her. The immense sense of grandeur she had envisioned from her mother's distant descriptions had vanished. In contrast, the house now felt more serene, enveloped in warmth. A space that, while strange, carried a sense of warmth beneath its surface. Harold approached her with a cautious smile, his actions careful, as though the slightest misstep could cause her to pull away once more. "Welcome," he said quietly, his voice gentle. Hallie nodded, her gaze sweeping over the gleaming floors and elaborate molding. "Thank you," she responded, her tone careful yet warm. Annie bounded down the staircase, her exuberance shattering the silence. "Hallie, you made it," she exclaimed, enveloping her half-sister in a warm embrace. Hallie tensed a bit, not used to such direct warmth, yet she remained where she was. Just for a brief moment, Hallie cautioned her, "Don't settle in too easily." Annie teased, her smile radiant, "Don't worry. Before long, you'll find yourself settling in quite nicely." The initial days were filled with discomfort. Meals unfolded in a series of extended pauses, with Harold grappling to articulate his thoughts, while Hallie hesitated to share her feelings. Annie's presence acted as a soothing balm, her playful banter and commitment to family movie nights alleviating the underlying tension. One evening after dinner, Harold mustered the bravery to approach Hallie in the living room. She nestled on the couch, her fingers gliding over her phone, as he settled down opposite her. "I've been reflecting," he started, his voice measured, "on your mother and the ways we might celebrate her legacy." Hallie glanced upward, her face a mix of caution and intrigue. "Could you clarify what you mean?" "I understand that I can never take back the errors I've committed," Harold said, his voice heavy with feeling. "Yet, I yearn to create something significant, something that embodies her essence and the principles she upheld." Annie, having listened in from the hallway, interjected. "Similar to a collaborative endeavor." "Hallie, didn't you mention that your mother has a strong dedication to assisting others?" Hallie paused, her fingers lightly brushing against the pendant of her necklace. She confessed gently. She consistently held the conviction that contributing to others was essential, regardless of how meager our possessions were. A brief glow of warmth illuminated Harold's face. "Let's proceed with that plan. Let's initiate a project in her honor." A community initiative aimed at assisting families in need made Hallie's defenses falter as she contemplated the proposal. "Do you really believe that will solve all the problems?" Harold replied with sincerity, "No. Yet, it's an initial step, and it's an endeavor we can embark on collectively." Hallie regarded him intently for a prolonged moment before finally nodding with deliberation. "Very well, let's find out if you're sincere." In the weeks that followed, the family found themselves collaborating in ways they had never anticipated. The synergy of Hallie's expertise in nonprofit work, Annie's vibrant enthusiasm, and Harold's ample resources forged a connection that deepened their bond. Little instances. A shared laugh over Annie's clumsy attempts at baking, a late-night brainstorming session in the study, gradually softened the barriers Hallie had constructed around her heart. One afternoon, as she sifted through photos for the initiative's promotional materials, Harold presented Hallie with a framed picture of Kathleen. She gazed at it, her throat constricting as a wave of memories surged forth. "She was extraordinary," Harold murmured, his tone imbued with admiration. "You evoke memories of her in such a profound way." Hallie's hold on the frame grew firmer, her heart heavy with a blend of pride and sorrow. "She deserved more," she expressed, her voice quivering. "She did," Harold conceded, tears shimmering in his eyes. "Yet, I aspire to improve now, for you and in honor of her memory." For the first time, Hallie perceived not the man who had left her behind, but a father earnestly seeking redemption. It didn't eliminate the suffering, but it sowed a glimmer of optimism. As the project developed, the residents evolved. What was once a realm of grief and stillness now thrived with vibrancy and intent. Volunteers filled the halls, laughter resonated from the kitchen, and Harold's previously serious demeanor transformed with the delight of contributing to a meaningful cause. One evening, as the trio gathered around the dining table, Annie lifted her glass in a toast. "To Mom," she declared, her voice shining with warmth and sincerity, "and to new beginnings." Hallie lifted her glass with a touch of uncertainty, her gaze locking onto Harold's. She echoed, "To Mom." As their glasses clinked, Harold was enveloped by a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It lacked perfection. Wounds remained to be mended, dialogues awaited to unfold. For the first time, he found the courage to believe they were on the journey to becoming a family, and in the warmth of that moment, he quietly expressed his gratitude to Kathleen. It was her affection and her enduring spirit that had reunited them, serving as a poignant reminder that even the most profound scars could pave the way for fresh starts. The community center rose majestically in the city's core, its exterior freshly painted and embellished with a simple plaque. The Kathleen Anderson Center stands as a testament to enduring compassion and fairness. The rooms hummed with a lively energy. As the launch event approached, volunteers diligently arranged chairs and set up banners proclaiming, "United against hate and strength in diversity." Harold lingered by the stage, his hands quivering as he fiddled with his tie. Years had passed since he last addressed an audience, and the significance of today's event surpassed any corporate presentation he had ever given. This centered on family, on Kathleen, on the journey of reconciliation. Hallie stepped into the room, her presence both authoritative and unassuming. She donned a modest dress, complemented by her mother's necklace, the gold pendant glimmering in the light. Since choosing to align herself with her father and sister in their endeavor, Hallie has embraced the position of a public advocate. Her tale of strength, affection, and the battle against bias had already started to motivate others. "Ready?" Annie inquired, materializing next to her with a clipboard clutched in her hand. She immersed herself in the organization of the center's outreach programs, her enthusiasm and positivity evident in every aspect. Hallie cast a quick look at Harold, who was anxiously moving back and forth by the podium. "He appears as if he's on the verge of collapsing," she remarked with a subtle smile. Annie smiled brightly. "He was quite the sight rehearsing his speech last night. It seems he exhausted an entire box of tissues." The room gradually filled with a vibrant mix of community members, activists, and friends, each finding their place among the seats. Hallie and Annie shared a knowing look before making their way to join their father by the stage. As the moment arrived to start, Annie took the lead, her radiant smile and inviting voice effortlessly calming the audience. She discussed the mission of the center, emphasizing the significance of establishing safe spaces and the relentless dedication required to turn the vision into reality. Next, it was Hallie's moment to shine. She approached the podium with a calm assurance, her voice unwavering as she recounted her tale. "I grew up without knowing my father," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd, "and for years, I held on to anger and questions about his absence. Yet, I was raised by a mother who instilled in me the importance of love, resilience, and advocating for what is just. This center is dedicated to her, to the strength she imparted to me, and to the strength we can share with one another." The crowd burst into applause, the sound resonating throughout the space. At last, Harold moved to the forefront, his hands firmly clutching the edges of the podium. He inhaled deeply, his voice wavering just a bit as he started to speak. "I stand here today as a person who has erred, significantly. I let my family down when they needed me the most, and for years, I allowed guilt and fear to prevent me from attempting to mend the situation." His gaze settled on Hallie and Annie in the front row, their faces reflecting a blend of pride and deep feeling. "Yet, my daughters, both of them, showed me that change is always within reach, that redemption can be achieved if one is ready to confront their errors and strive for improvement." He halted, the atmosphere completely still. "This center goes beyond merely correcting my mistakes. It's about crafting a realm where everyone can embrace their true selves without feeling inferior, where compassion and empathy prevail over animosity and dread. Today, we gather to pay tribute to the memory of my beloved wife, Kathleen, whose unwavering courage and boundless love have led us to this moment." Tears shimmered in the eyes of numerous audience members as Harold took a step back, his speech receiving a heartfelt standing ovation. The remainder of the occasion unfolded as a joyous celebration. Engaging sessions, inspiring talks, and narratives exchanged within a lively, optimistic audience. Hallie was enveloped by an audience keen to delve deeper into her experiences, while Annie gracefully navigated between clusters, making certain that all proceeded without a hitch. As the evening came to an end, Harold gathered with his daughters at the entrance of the center. The trio stood together, hands clasped, observing the final guests as they made their way out. If this film resonates with you, show your appreciation with a like, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more impactful narratives. We invite you to share your thoughts and your own experiences with us. Each word you contribute serves as a vital component in constructing our resilient and lasting community. Together, we will cultivate an inviting environment where all can express themselves and forge connections. At last, prepare yourself for the remarkable tales that are about to unfold. We are consistently dedicated to providing you with exceptional choices, rich in meaningful insights while remaining enjoyable. Looking forward to seeing you there.